I tell people you need three things to be a good artist, and you need the same three things to be a good bull rider. And you need to have confidence, faith, and ignorance. And people go, oh, the ignorance kind of throws them. And they say, why do you say ignorance? I says, because you got to believe that you can do it even though everything's stacked against you.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold brush. My name is Laura Arango-Bayer, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. On this episode, we sat down with Chris Navarro, a professional bronze sculptor with a passion for Western art. Chris tells us all about his past as a bull and buck rider, his serendipitous discovery of his love of sculpting, the 3 ingredients to becoming a great artist, and how he always uses rejection as a motivator for getting his work to the next level. Finally, he tells us about the importance of having a good reputation and keeping your word as an artist to your collectors. And we hear all about his new projects and his participation at the upcoming Briscoe Night of the Artists. Welcome, Chris, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
I'm doing well, really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. As I was saying, I'm so excited to have you on the show. You're my very first guest who is a sculptor, and you sculpt for a living, and your sculptures are absolutely breathtaking, amazing. It is, again, aside from sculpture, it is specifically monumental sculpture that you do, which is an even smaller niche within sculpture.
I specialize in monumental sculptures, but I do all sizes of tabletops. Besides, usually every monument I do a maquette, to figure out my designs and compositions first. And then I usually end up casting my maquettes and doing those also. But, when you're doing a big monument like that big T-Rex I did, that's 28 feet long and 13 and a half feet tall. So, and then I made it half skeletal and half flesh, but I made a maquette of it and work out my designs and proportions.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point to make. Of course, before you make something large, kind of like when you do painting, you always have like a little study of the final piece so you can work out any issues, to prevent any issues from happening with the final piece, which of course with sculpture, you would have the same thing. But I do admire that, a lot of your pieces are monumental. They are quite big. And of course, we can dive into the actual I guess the logistics of how they're cast and everything a little bit later. But before we dive in, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, my name's Chris Navarro. I'm just turned 68 years old. I've been a professional bronze artist for over 38 years. I've owned a gallery in Sedona, Arizona for the last 24 years. I have 2 studios. I have a studio in Casper, Wyoming. This is my hometown. And I also have a studio in Sedona and an art gallery that I own. So my wife and I run that.
Nice.
And I've been blessed to be able to make a living at this roller coaster ride of being a professional artist. Because,
Gosh.
that's one thing great about it. I mean, it's one of the things about it. You never know how much money you're going to make from month to month. So it's always interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been really fortunate. I've been able to support my family and have a good life from it and do
Amazing.
something I love. So it's not something I plan on retiring from. I just I don't know how many more years I got climbing ladders and scaffolding, but I got a few more, I'm hoping.
Yeah. And I mean, it'll keep you fit to also,
Oh
maintain
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, I try to
But yeah,
stay fit. I ride horses a lot, and I got into pickleball here the last few years. My wife and I play a lot of pickleball.
that's
And
awesome.
I, and
Yeah.
I have like a yoga routine I do every morning, so I kind of keep things running and keep the juices flowing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the older you get, the more you need to use it or lose it, they say.
Exactly. That's an excellent point to make. So it's that's awesome that you have a routine and you're focused on, not just feeding your soul with your work, but also your body with keeping that up. I think it's such a balance, and especially as artists, it can be such a sedentary lifestyle. Although, with sculpture, you're definitely more on your feet than a painter, of course.
I try to be pretty active and do a lot of things. So I've also had a lot of injuries, over my rodeo career, and I think yoga's been the best thing. I started doing it in 2012 because everything was starting to hurt, my back, just And, stretching and getting things moving first thing in the morning, it's a good way to start the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely wakes you up. And then, I find it interesting too that, you just mentioned your injuries, how a lot of your work is it's very Western, has a lot of horses. And, for our listeners who maybe haven't heard, like you mentioned, you did have a career, riding bulls and broncs. Do you mind telling us a bit about that?
Yeah, I got my first horse when I was 12 years old. I always wanted to be a cowboy when I was a little boy. And my mom said, ever since I was like 2, 3 years old, that's all I wanted to be was a cowboy. So
Oh,
I was
wow.
fortunate. I got a horse given to me when I was 12 years old. We were stationed at another air base. Another family had a horse and they were being transferred and they gave me the horse. So, and with great training because I didn't have a saddle at the time. So I rode that horse bareback for a whole year before I got my first saddle. So that was really good training for getting balance and coordination and for riding rough stock. So I started showing horses. I joined 4-H and I started working with some trainers that were at the stables where I kept my horses, and I would ride some of the younger, inexperienced horses and get them gentled down some. And I really liked horses. Horses have been a big part of my life. They still are. So when I was 16, we were transferred again to Madrid, Spain, which is Torrejon Air Base, and they had a riding stable over there. And then I went to there's a military rodeo circuit over there between the Navy, the Marines, the Army, and the Air Force. And the different bases, they have the rodeo clubs over there. And I got introduced to that, and I watched some guys riding bulls and broncs one day, and I said, I'd like to try that. Next thing you know, I started getting on some, and I started having pretty good success at the beginning, and it's just something I had a real passion for. Had a lot of passion for it because I hadn't gotten injured. I mean, that's the thing. When you're young, you still bounce at 16. So
Mhm.
I rode bulls all through school, and then I won the title I won the all-around title over there when I was a senior in high school in the military circuit. So I was riding against the guys that were probably 5, 6 years older than me. They were all mostly enlisted military men, a lot of Marine Corps guys, a lot of Navy, and a lot of Air Force and some Army guys. So I was a dependent. My dad was in the military, but I wasn't. But I was riding against all the soldiers that were most of them were soldiers that I was riding against. And I loved it. And I thought, well, man, I want to do this for a living. And I'd
Mhm.
had some success with it. And my parents said, my parents both have college degrees. And they both said, there's not much of a future in this. We want you to get to school and get a college degree. And that's when I read an article in Western Horseman magazine about Casper College rodeo team and what a great team they had. They won they were the national champions for several years. And I said, well, if I'm going to go to college, I might as well go where they rodeo. And I said, I've never been to Wyoming before. And Wyoming's called the cowboy state. I said, well, that's the place I ought to go. So I remember I was 18 years old. I bought an old car for $250 in San Antonio, Texas, where my family's all from. And I drove all the way from San Antonio, Texas up to Casper, Wyoming. This is in 1974. And I had that old car for $250 and everything I owned in the trunk, and I didn't know one person in the whole state of Wyoming. And then I liked it so much, I just settled there. It's still my home now. And that's one thing I like growing up. And, I didn't like people say, oh, you didn't know anybody? I said, no, it wasn't that big a difference from my past life, moving every 2 to 3 years. So I really didn't even think much about it. So I started there with the dreams of that, and I went to college for 2 years, and I rode bulls. Had a little bit of success, not as much as I wanted. And then I left college, and I tried to ride bulls full time for 9 months. I got tired. I got hurt a few times. I was tired of not having any money at all. I was just poor. I was living from hand to mouth, and I couldn't. It was a hard existence financially. So I decided to quit riding bulls and finally get my life together. And I started working in Wyoming oil fields. And I was starting to make some pretty good money working on oil rigs. So I was wearing a hard hat and steel toes and getting greasy, dirty every day and working outside. And I mean, I liked the work. It was good, hard physical work. But I was, in the prime of my life at 21. And then I did that for a couple of years, and I felt like something was missing. Then one day we were out hunting, my roommate and I, we were going through Lost Cabin, Wyoming. And there's a famous Wyoming sculptor named Harry Jackson. And I didn't know Harry Jackson or any of his work. So his cousin was a caretaker for Harry, and he says, "Hey, let's go over and after we'll get something to eat over at my cousin's. He's managing this ranch and studio for Harry Jackson." I said, "Oh, that'd be great." So when we get there, they have this bronze, and they pull it out of a crate, and it's a beautiful bronze of a cowboy riding steamboat, the famous Wyoming bucking horse, and it's called Two Champs. It was probably about, I don't know, it was probably at least 40 inches tall. And it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. And this guy's riding this horse is just twisting inside out, and he's spurring him, and it's back from like the early 1900s when they used to ride broncs back then with single rig saddles and all that. And I said, man, I go, that is the most beautiful thing I've seen. I'd like to own that. How much is that? The guy goes, it's $35,000. I said, wow, that's a lot of money. This was in 1979. I'm thinking like, man, I can't afford that. But you know what? Maybe I go make me one. So very next day, I had the spark that lit in me, and I went down to the art store in Casper. And it's called Godek's Art Store. I met John Godek, who owned it, and I said, hey, I don't know anything about making bronze sculptures, but I want to do one. And he said, well, I can give you some supplies. So he sold me a bunch of supplies, and I drove over to the Natrona County Library, which is about 4 blocks away. And I went to the library, and I said, I really don't know that much about sculpting. Can you give me every book you got on sculpture? And I think I got like a dozen books. And then I was living in a trailer house at the time. So I drove all that back and started going through those books and putting the materials in my hand. And I mean, I learned from the trial and error. It was a slow process going that way. But I made my first sculpture. It was a bull rider. It was called Spinning and Winning. And I cast it the next year. And I remember it cost me $1,000 to cast that sculpture. And that took almost, I don't know, 2/3 of my paycheck for the month. And I was thinking like, wow, that's pretty expensive. And I said I had to do it. Well, Coleco Foundry in Cody, Wyoming is run by Bucky Hall. And him and I have been in business now going on for 43 years. And he saw it. He goes, that's pretty nice for your first piece. He goes, there's a local art show here at the Cody Art League. Let me enter it. I said, well, I don't know. That's my first sculpture. I said, all right. So he entered it for me, and I won a blue ribbon in first place and $15. And I said, well, I'm on to something now. And I don't know, I'm just getting a little bit of reassurance that maybe I could do something like this. And next thing I know, I just start sculpting. So I'm working all day, and then I'd go home at night and sculpt. And on the weekends, if I had weekends off, I'd go sculpt. And I just started creating art, and I started drawing. And I went to Casper College, and they had an art department. I didn't even major in art when I went to school there. When I was riding bulls, I was an animal science technology major. So I took horseshoeing, and I took beef production, horse production. I was learning agriculture. It's an agricultural department. And I was thinking I should have gone in the art department. I didn't know you could make a living as an artist. Never entered my mind. And then I went back to college at night, and I started I took painting and drawing, and I took photography, and I took creative writing and video production. I went back and started learning these things that I needed. I mean, when you're an artist, you got to wear a lot of hats. I mean, so I had to learn that. I was trying to find somebody to photograph my sculptures, and I had to drive down to Loveland, Colorado, because there's a bunch of professional bronze artists live in Loveland, Colorado, because of the huge foundries that are down there. But that's 250 miles each way. And then the guy was charging me $100 a sculpture to shoot them, and I was watching them. And this was back in the old days when it was film, and they were shooting them with 4x5 full cameras, full format cameras. And I so I remember I went to a pawn shop, bought a used one, a graphic view, and then I learned how to do it because, magazines wouldn't even look at you. You sent them slides back in those days. Things have changed so much. I mean, digital cameras, the internet. But back in the Stone Age, in the 1980s, there wasn't any of that. And you know what's, I feel like, at least in the United States and probably most of the world, we're experiencing kind of a renaissance in art. I believe there's more professional artists in our times now than in any other time. And it has to do with the internet. Back in the old days, before the internet and everything else, I mean, the only way that you could get success is you had to get into art magazines. You had to do there was just a handful of good art shows back then to get in, and you had to have gallery representation. And then people that's how they found out about you. But now with the internet, it opens the field up for so many people to actually share their work with others. And I've been in the internet. I got my first website in 1996. It was a group website with Artists for Conservation. I'm still with that group, but I have my own website now with FASO. And that's been a really good website because I was doing building from scratch, keeping it updated, having speed problems, crash problems. There was always some kind of problems, but I'll be honest, since FASO's taken it over, it's been it makes it a lot easier. And I think, just look how many artists are on there. I mean, there's more artists that have websites now than ever, and I think there's just more growing. So it's just changed the whole nature of being a professional artist. The internet has.
Yeah, it's definitely helped it become more got accessible, for a lot of people. And especially, there are even people today who have absolutely no gallery representation and they can still make a living
That's true.
just thanks to the internet, which I find amazing. And, obviously, you had to have a lot of tenacity, uh, you know, before, right? Before the internet became so
Oh,
accessible. You
yeah,
had to, oof.
I tell people that, bull riding was really, then some don't believe it, but it was good training to be a professional artist. It makes you mentally and physically tough for one thing. The second thing it does, I tell people you need three things to be a good artist, and you need the same three things to be a good bull rider. And you need to have confidence, faith, and ignorance. And people go, oh, the ignorance kind of throws them. And they say, why do you say ignorance? I says, because you got to believe that you can do it even though everything's stacked against you. Like you get on this big old 1,800-pound bull and you think like, he ain't going to step on me and hurt me. I'm just going to ride him, And if you start thinking that way, you're going to get hurt. If you start thinking like, oh, you go in there with some fear, you're going to get hurt. So
Yeah,
I think, it
absolutely.
made me, I try to live my life with as little fear as possible in it. And I think that was a great training. So like, I haven't been afraid to step out there and do things like that. And so like I was sculpting for almost 7 years before I decided to do it full time. And me and my wife got married in 1980. That was the same year I cast my first sculpture. So she's kind of seen the career go from nothing to something. And then I was working in the oil field. I was a field superintendent at the time. I was making a pretty good living. I had an office and a secretary and a truck and a steady paycheck. And then it was March 13th, 1986. I went in there and I quit that job. And my little boy was 10 months old, and my wife was pregnant with our daughter. And nobody thought it was a good decision. Nobody said, hey, my mom said, son, that's pretty risky. She says, you've never been afraid of risk. So, I went out there. I didn't have a plan B a whole lot. I had a thrift plan at work and I'd saved about $25,000. And that was my seed money to get me started. I told my wife, I says, if I can't make a living in a year at this, I'll go back and work in the oil rigs. But I think I can make this go. And, it seems like when sales started getting low or something would come along, a commission or a big sale would come along, and I started getting in more galleries. And when I first started marketing, so this is back in 1986 when I became a full-time artist, the internet still wasn't around. So with galleries was kind of the way that I figured to go. And I said, well, the only people that buy art have discretionary income. So I'm going to go to places that have wealthy people living at them. And that's kind of my basic philosophy. It wasn't that deep. I went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I got in a gallery there. I also went to Aspen, Colorado. I was in a gallery in Park City. I like to ski, so I started working in it. I was in Vail and Breckenridge. And they were places I could drive to in a day from Wyoming. And I started marketing all my artwork there and they started selling. And that was kind of the thing that got me going. And I was fortunate that I was able to kind of keep things rolling where I never got completely busted out, where I had to go back to get another job. So I've always just believed that, I can do this, and sometimes you work a lot of hours at it. And, I figured whatever I lacked in talent, I'd make up with hard work. And I don't really have an academic background in art. I tell people I have a PhD in art, though, because I was poor, I was hungry, and I was determined. That's my PhD.
Oh, wow.
And I've still been blessed with it, and then, after about 7 years, I started taking my first workshops. There's Scottsdale's artist workshops down in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I think I took my first work from Jerry Balsier, a great sculptor. And my learning curve went so fast in that 1 week. I said, wow. So in the next 3 years, I did 12 workshops with different artists, Richard McDonald, Glenna Goodacre, Ed Fraughton. I studied with some real masters of bronze sculptors. And I tell you what, if you want to be a bronze artist, that's the quickest way, I think, to learn it. It's not through books and trial and error. And even though that's how I started, because I didn't know any better, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And now that I've taught like 6 workshops, and they take a lot out of you. When I teach a workshop, I'm tired for the next week for 2 after, because I put a lot into it, and I try to give those students everything I've got, because that's what the people before me were giving me, everything they got. So,
Yeah.
and I like to use live models whenever I do workshops. I did one up in Kalispell, Montana. It was called Lion, Tigers, and Bears, and we actually had a grizzly bear, a live grizzly bear, live tiger, And so he had like half a dozen mountain lions up there too. Plus he had wolves and otters. It was a game farm up in Kalispell, Montana. See, in Wyoming, you're not allowed to have game farms. So Montana and Colorado, those places can have game farms, but Wyoming can't. So, but I thought there's nothing better, and it was so fun to sculpt grizzly bears from life, you know, because it's not something you get to do every day. That's probably one of my most fun workshops. And then, you know, a lot of the other workshops I used to use, I'd bring my own horses, and we use horses for models, and I still use them for models. I mean, I ride them all the time too. I rope on them, so I get double dip on them. So, and that's one thing, you know, I think the two hardest things to sculpt as a representational artist, number one is a human figure, and number two is horses. And I think those two are the most difficult to actually get the realistic, you know, the realism coming through on them. Or if you get anything off proportionally, people just notice it, you know, at least I do. And that's why, you know, whenever I sculpt or do any proportions, I work out my proportions by head size. So like when I'm sculpting a horse, I usually, you know, an average horse head is about 26 inches and an average man's head is about 9 inches. So I'm going to do a 1/6 scale. I scale everything off of that. And I usually use the metric system so much better than standard. So to make something look realistic, you've got to get the proportions right. If you get the head too big or the legs too short or the body too thin, you know, and I think I try to elongate things a little bit because it's more attractive, you know, than making things short and squatty. So, you know, I take some artistic license, you know, and then, you know, when you do these big monuments, you just put all that aside and you start just sculpting away on it. In fact, the most fun thing I've ever sculpted in my whole career, I did a life-size T-Rex, and I was sculpting on the head. And I had the head where I could bring it off with a crane, you know, so I could set it lower so I could stand around and walk around it. But the head was huge; it was 5 feet long, you know. And I started just free forming on it. I was like, I really don't. I've never seen a T-Rex, and there's not any good reference material on T-Rexes, you know. So I mean, I had a skull replica that was cast, and I kind of used that for the teeth measurements and everything else. Then I put all that stuff aside, and I just started sculpting it. It was so fun. Just like I was just making it out of my mind mostly, which is the most fun way to sculpt, in my opinion. I hate sitting there and looking at reference material, and I just like to let it flow if I can. That's why I like doing these quick draws that I've been doing for the last 38 years. I used to do 2 quick draws a year. I still do the one at the Buffalo Bill Art Show and the Jackson Hole Arts Festival. They're a week apart. So you got to do a sculpture in 90 minutes from start to finish, and then I'll cast them in bronze, but they'll auction them off, and then how many people, you know, you can sell them to is. But you know, it's getting in that flow state, and that's I'm a big believer in the mental aspects of life, you know, where you can like not overthink things too much and just kind of let them flow out of you, and that's the funnest way to make art or do anything really. Because once you get going on it, it's that 90 minutes goes by like it's like 15 minutes. That's an hour and a half has gone by. And you get so zoned in and so in tune to what you're doing. And that's one of the things I like about, that's one of the things that attracted me about bull riding, you know, it's just, you went into instant flow state. Every time you climbed on a bull and nodded your head, it was just like, bam, your whole senses, your hearings would go away. And you just be so focused on what you're doing. And I find that doing these quick draws, it's a similar experience, except it lasts a lot longer. But I've read every book I can on flow, you know, there's quite a few books out there on it, and now I still compete in team roping, and I try to use that, and I've been competing in pickleball too, and you get in those flow states doing that, you know, and that's I don't know, for me it's kind of an addictive thing, and anytime I can get in flow, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if this even makes any sense to everybody.
Oh, it does. I think it will. You know, there's so much to, you know, creation that is so dependent on flow. And, you know, on the one hand, you know, being careful, like you were saying, with proportion, with making sure that things are like a puzzle that fits together in a cohesive manner that makes sense. But at the same time, there's that balance of the more abstract conceptual side that allows for more of this creative side to come through without all the logic. You know, it's such a balance. Yeah.
I
It's
definitely don't believe in overthinking things. Like I remember when
yeah.
that lady asked me, she goes, yeah, I want to sculpt a dinosaur and I want light to come out of it. And I said, yeah, I can do that. Never even entered my mind that I would come up with that idea. It's a 90-year-old lady, and she says, I want to leave a big monument to the state of Wyoming at the Tate Museum, and I want it to be a dinosaur light coming out of it. And I thought, wow, that is what a
So cool.
request.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm going to do a dinosaur, I'm going to do a T-Rex. And if I'm going to do light out of it, I know I got to have a negative cavity in there, so I'll make it half flesh and half skeletal. So when you looked at one side of the whole sculpture, it looks like a completely fleshed out T-Rex. And then you'd spin it around, and it would be a total skeleton. And I don't know. It was it was a cool concept. It had light coming out of it. And the same lady also commissioned me to do. I did a 17-foot tall Jesus Christ, and it was a Sacred Heart of Jesus, and she wanted light to come out of his heart. Designed that, and it was a challenge to do that. So I've only done 2 sculptures with light coming out of them, and Mary Alice Tobin was the benefactor who commissioned me to do that. And then the last piece I was working on, she passed away before I got it done for her, but. Artists need those kind of collectors and sponsors to do a lot of these big projects, and I'm always grateful for that. Yeah. Because I get to make a living doing something I do for nothing, and I get paid for it, and I've been able to make a good living at it, but I don't want to take it for granted because I know what it's like not to have nothing, and I know what it's like to be at the bottom, looking your way up, trying to like going to 5 galleries and they all turning you down because they don't want to represent you because your work's not good enough. I know what that's like. Yeah. It's not a good feeling, but it fires you up. I always, I'm trying to help other artists out, and I tell them I let rejection work for me. When someone tells me that my work's not good enough, or I can't get in this show, or I get rejected for this, or I get a rejection letter for applying for a big show, or a gallery turns me down, says no, I just say, oh yeah, okay, so give me a chance. I'm going to work a little harder and get it right, and then, the first time I went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, to try to in galleries. It was before I became a professional. I had like 5 or 6 little sculptures, and I went in my little portfolio, and I knocked on 5 doors. I started at the best gallery and went down to the other ones. And I said, well, these are the 5 galleries I'd want to be in. They all told me no. And my wife was waiting for me in the car, and I went back and I said, you know what? I'm not good enough yet to get in these galleries. I want to go home and work harder. That's how I took it. I didn't say like, oh, golly, I can't, this and that. You're not going to please everybody with your work, and you shouldn't try to, but you should try to do your very best. And that's the only thing I can really do. I can't do anything else. And I try not to let others, what's going on in someone else's mind, really, I got no control of that. But I can try to control my mindset, and that's kind of how I look at it. And I've been fortunate to make a living at it with that kind of mindset. I know there's a lot of young artists, because I get approached by all these artists that want to be represented at my own gallery in Sedona, and we only have probably about 15 artists, and I have to take somebody down to put somebody new up, and it's hard rejecting these young artists that come in there and they bring their portfolios, because I know what it's like, and I tell them that. I said, man, good luck, because you know what, just keep working hard. I said, you know how you get better? Make lots of art, and the more art you make, the better you're going to get. I don't know any other simple way to explain it, but the sheer number of hours you put in the process, that's how you get better. There's no quick fixes. There's not no gallery. There's not no art agent. There's not no article in some magazine that's going to make your career. It's a lifelong struggle. You just keep doing and going to the next thing. Like when I finish a big sculpture, I put that aside and don't even think about it anymore. I go start on another one, and I think that's the way I approach it. I'm not saying my way is doing it is the right for everybody. It's just worked for me.
Yeah. Wow. You have given a lot of wise advice. And I especially love, instead of, letting the rejection get to you, using that as motivation to work harder. I think it's funny because a lot of people, they think, oh, I got rejected, therefore I'm never going to be good enough. And I think, that absolutist sort of mentality is really, it's so bad because it's a glass ceiling. It's like, no, you can always improve. Any sort of craft, there's always something more. And then I think you have a very stoic mindset, which is great. It's the whole like, if it's out of my control, it's out of my control. If I can do something about it, I will. And that's all you can really do.
I have that mindset that keeps my sanity, to be honest with you. The thing you're responsible for is doing the very best you can. Absolutely. And that's what I try to do, the very best I can. I don't want to do anything any less. But your best isn't good enough for a lot of places or people, So, you just got to do what you think you can do. In your own heart if you gave it all your effort, and that's about all you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and to tie it back to your experience with, writing bowls and broncs, I feel like in a way that is so similar to sculpting in the sense that, you have this wild material in front of you and it's going to do what it wants to do. And you can't really do much about that except work around it. And like so much of writing these animals is basically shaping yourself to their movements, right? You have to
You
be in
follow
flow
them,
with
they don't
them.
follow you. That's right.
Exactly.
Kinda like a dance
So,
partner.
yeah, so it makes perfect sense that, it would be excellent training ground for such a complicated and difficult career like sculpture and being a full-time artist, right? Because you have to fit yourself into whatever direction, life is taking you, whether it's more sales, less sales. You have to always constantly adjust your schedule. You have to adjust, what you need to get done. And okay, I have to take this to the foundry now, but then I also have this other commission, and then I have to talk to this other person. There's so much, like you were saying, with putting on all these different hats, and you have to be the salesman, the producer, the marketer, the everything, like it's insane. So again,
That's
I
why,
commend you.
well, and like I said at the beginning of the stage, the art magazines were the way to go, but it was expensive doing a full page ad in Southwest Art or Western Art Collector or whatever, these Wildlife Art News, all these magazines I used to do full page ads and it cost you several $1,000s to do one time ad. And then that ad has such a short shelf life, that magazine's 6, 8 weeks, and other issues out and that's all gone and it doesn't do you any good anymore. And I always thought, man, if I got to get a big article in Southwest Art, that'd help make me. I got a big article in Southwest Art. It was gone in 6 weeks and it didn't make me. So I think, myself, I've been putting most of my advertising money and promotion money into the internet, mostly with, I've been I usually make a YouTube video of all my new sculptures. So I have like 140 or so videos on my YouTube site. Then I cross them over into my website. And I think it's, showing sculptures three-dimensionally with videos is a really great way to do it. Plus, a lot of people don't know your story until you tell them. I've written 4 books about, my artwork too. And I didn't have anybody coming and saying, hey, Chris Navarro, we'd like to do a big book on your artwork. I said, nobody was coming to do that for me. So I said, well, I'll make my own book. Besides, who's going to know more about what I want to say about my art than me? And
Exactly.
that's why I've written 4 books. And I think those books have really done well for me. And I mostly just promote them on my website and at my art gallery, galleries that represent me. I don't really have them in bookstores or anything else like that, but it really wasn't so much as a vehicle to make money as far as it was to get my thoughts and my artwork out in front of a lot of people. And I think that's a good way to look at it. And then people always ask, well, how do you price your work? Well, I price my work, because foundry bills are so expensive. And I think being a bronze artist, and especially in nowadays, ever since COVID, bronze foundry bills have almost doubled. And since 2020, and I've never seen it like this. And I've been casting bronzes for over 43 years, and I think it's the most difficult medium to break into for a young artist right now. It's because of all the financial outlay you have to get your bronzes cast. And I think it's and another thing about it is when you finish a sculpture, it'll take you 3 to 4 months to see the first casting because you got to make your mold, then you got to do the ceramic shell and dipping it and all that. That's why, I took some painting and I've done some painting. I like plein air painting. I had a good friend who was a really good plein air painting. I'd go out to him and we'd do some plein air painting and it's so fun. It's just like you get to make something in an hour and a half or an hour, and you're done. And it might be just a 6x9 or whatever, but it's very gratifying. You get a kind of instant gratification. In sculpture, you don't get that instant gratification. You get that long haul gratification. And that's part of the nature of it. And I really don't know what's going to happen for the future for bronze artists because the foundry business has been in such a flux since COVID. And a lot of foundry businesses have gone out of business in the United States. Some of them are, and now, it used to take 8 weeks to get a casting, and now it's over, 5 months for some tabletops, and it's over a year for a monument, just to get it cast, where it's just really, it's changed the whole business since COVID.
I wonder why. It makes me
Well, a
wonder.
lot of it had a lot of employees. A lot of employees left, and it's hard physical work, and
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. I've
and
seen
it's
I've seen a lot of those foundries and it's usually this huge space, and especially if you're making monuments, you need a lot more space than, a typical
you need a big
painter, right?
building for sure, and then you got
Yeah,
to have
so
welders, compressors, sandblasters, grinders. It's
So
just
nice.
it's a lot of it's and you don't stay clean in it. You know, it's a
No.
dirty. You get pretty dirty if working in foundries. It's
Yeah.
not like you get a little paint smudged on you. It's you get pretty dirty doing foundry work.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think there's always going to be a place for bronze castings. Because
Yes.
the great thing about bronze is it's such a permanent medium. Like all these outdoor monuments that I have out now, or anybody's, they're going to last for thousands of years. I think the first castings they have are from China, and they're over 5,000 years old. So bronze really doesn't rust. It's mostly copper alloy. Silicon bronze is mostly what we use now, and it's just a tough, permanent medium. That's one thing. Like I did this 15-foot eagle dancer, and I've got him holed up on his toes. And I had to put some stainless steel supports through there, but it's the only thing that you can really make it fly. Like you can't do that with stone or wood. That
So
was sculpting.
true.
So I try to exploit the bronze, the tensile strength of everything because you can really get some movement in it.
Yeah, that's very true. It's with like marble, for example, the David, he has a crack that's starting to happen because, it's such a rigid medium and his pose isn't exactly the most stable. So that is a great point to make with bronze being a lot more
Well,
stable.
it was a flawed stone that Michelangelo did that with.
Yeah.
It was already rejected by two other artists, and then they carved some on it, and so he made a maquette out of terracotta, to work into the stone. Like a lot of people think that Michelangelo just grabbed a chisel and went to town. He didn't do that. He made clay maquettes just like everybody. I mean, you got to work out your design and composition in a small maquette. You're
Mhm.
not just going to take a chisel and make something as beautiful as David. And just like and his Pietà, I mean, he was a genius. He's probably the greatest artist that ever lived, in my opinion. That's my opinion, but when he was 23, he did the Pietà. I think he did David when he was 25, 26, and then he did the Sistine Chapel. I mean, the most iconic pieces of art are his. You go to the library and there's two shelves on Michelangelo than any other artist. I mean, that was a genius, and he lived to be 89 years old. He died in like 1565, I believe. And the average, so I looked it up and I said, what's the average male expectancy in Italy at that time? It was 43 years. And he lived to be 89. He worked till the day he died. I mean, that guy, he woke up with a passion and a purpose. And I think that'll keep it young. And I want to try to go that route myself, wake up with a passion and purpose every day.
At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by Faso. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal, considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e-commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day-by-day, step-by-step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's faso.com/podcast. I think you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it's so funny because I actually do have obviously I have Michelangelo's David's lips right behind me, which is so funny. How enduring sculpture can be. Obviously paintings, they're beautiful, but there is, the impact of sculpture. It's present. It's 360 degrees.
It's three
Which is
dimensions
also
like light. You can touch it,
yeah,
your hands over it, you
exactly.
can feel it. In fact, I've been really moved at it. I've done a few shows where some blind people have come in and they ask if they can touch my sculptures, and that's how
That's
they see the
nice.
sculpture with their hands. And it's kind of a cool experience to watch people do that.
It is, yeah,
I said,
because it's
"Let's
so
show
it's so
you."
hard to find tactile, like, art experiences.
In fact, at my gallery, like I don't tell people they can't touch the bronzes. I say, yeah, touch them. Feel them, feel how heavy
Yeah.
they are, feel the weight in them.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
yeah, that's the great thing about sculpture because it's like us. We're three dimensional, and painting's two dimensional. But so you got to work out all your problems 360 degrees,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
unless you
true.
want a big relief. In fact, I'm
Yeah.
trying to do a big relief right now. I'm trying to work on a commission that's going to be 11 by 40 feet. It's going to go to Wyoming. If we're in the beginning stages of it, it's called Buffalo and the Iron Horse, and it's an 1870 steam locomotive running head on it, and a charging buffalo is running in the other way. So they're going to collide in the middle, but they're like separated, and they're on their way in there. So it's going to cover the whole side of one of the buildings in the museum. So I hope that job comes through. It's hard to know because I'll bid 10 jobs to get one, and that's just the nature of the business. So I sure would like to get that job though. It would be a very cool to do a relief that big. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, to do-
amazing. Oh, I hope you get it. And speaking of, I really want to know, maybe there's someone out there who's listening and maybe they're interested in sculpting. What advice could you give them if they want to start getting into sculpture?
Well, I would say, if you really want to take a workshop from a professional, if you can, and if you can't, there's some great books on sculpture. Lantieri has great sculptures on modeling the animals and modeling the human figure. Those are very good. Sculpture from the Inside Out is another great book. There's so many. I mean, I read constantly. I listen to books. I even listen to audiobooks when I'm working. Mostly all nonfiction. There's so many great books out there. I'll get so tuned in a book, it'll make me want to stay in the studio longer just so I can keep hearing to it if it's a great book. And there's a bunch of great ones out there. And I like mostly all nonfiction because there's some amazing stories out there that are real, true, instead of fantasy or anything like that. But I really believe that your brain is like the more good things you put in it, the more good things are going to come out. So it's like a little computer.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. And I specifically love that Sculpting a Human Figure book by it's Lanteri, right? Or Lanteri?
Yeah,
I can't
like
remember.
Terry.
Yeah, amazing, amazing book. And
He
actually,
figured modeling animals. And they're old books. They were made back at the early teens.
and they're amazing.
Yeah, they're very novel. And he talks about building monuments too. And that's the old
Yeah.
school when they built them out of plaster and make them out of big wood platforms.
Yes.
Now, when I first started doing monuments, I'd sculpt them out of, I had an access to oil field pipe. So I'd make the armatures out of oil field pipe, weld them together, and then I would use foam and then put a layer of clay on there. Usually I'd try to get about a 1 inch or an inch, some would vary. And I'd use this urethane spray foam. I'd bring in a guy that did insulation, and I'd draw a cutout of it, and put it to cardboard over the armature and then spray it. And then he'd spray it, overspray it, and then I'd tell him to come back the next day, and I'd work crazy all night and trying to carve it back to where it looked where it needed. And then I'd say, hey, spray it here and spray it there. That's the old way of doing it. Now they have computers that are doing these computer generated printings and everything else now. I mean, technology is changing a lot of art, and not just with AI, but actually, doing sculptures from with router bits and they're made by machines some places.
Yeah.
But I hope that nobody takes the hand factor out of them.
No, I don't think it'll ever go away. I feel like absolutely nothing can replace, the human hand, the human act of creation. I mean, if it did, then painters would have been out of jobs forever ago, and sculptors because of photography, because of a machine can do that. But here we are, like it's still happening. We're still creating.
I tell you, I'm
Uh,
amazed how fast technology is advancing everything. To be honest with you, I
it
mean,
is, yeah,
I was born in 1956. That was when things were really, way different than they are now. So
absolutely, they are.
I tell you what, though, the thing about the technology, there's a lot of good in it too, and I think that you can, use that. Just like I was saying, how there's more professional artists making a living because of technology of the
Yeah,
internet. The internet's made a big change in everything, and that's why if you're an artist and you want to get out there, you can get your artwork out there in front of people. You just, if you think you're just going to sit in your studio and just make artwork and you're going to be successful, that's not how it works. You got to promote your work. You got to that's why I learned photography. I learned video making. I learned creative writing because I got to write these stories about it was either that or I had to hire somebody. And, at the time I didn't have the money to hire somebody. So I had to kind of learn on how to do these things. And the more I've done them, the better I've gotten at them. It's just like anything else. Because, I look back at my first early sculptures, they're not very good, in my opinion now, but they were the best I could do back then. And that's the way it should be. You get better as you do things. And the more you do, the more you learn. You learn through error, you learn through success, you learn through all kinds of experiences. So, but if I was a professional, if I was an artist out there and I really wanted to learn to make a living, whether it was painting, drawing, sculpting, printmaking, whatever, there's a lot of good workshops out there. Go find a pro that you think is really somebody that could teach you something. And every workshop I've ever taken or given, artists have been very giving of their information. That's taken them a lifetime to learn. And it's usually most workshops are 5 days long. I don't know what they cost now, but they were about $500-$600 back in the day. And that's a good money well spent. Go learn with a pro. If you want to be a pro, go learn with one.
Yeah. Yeah. And even online, a lot of people are teaching online workshops. So, there's a breadth of information out there. And even YouTube. There are a lot of painters on YouTube as well, sharing their information freely.
I use
It's just,
YouTube all the time to learn how to fix a sink or
yeah. YouTube is great. And then speaking of YouTube and also, repurposing old things, you have this interesting project that I came across. They were the parts of those huge
turbine blades.
wind turbines. Yeah. I'm so curious about your idea with the wind
Well,
turbine, like
I
Stonehenge.
almost wish that sucker wouldn't have come into my head because what happened is I live in Casper, Wyoming, and there's a lot of wind turbines out in Wyoming because we have a lot of wind, and we have our landfill out there. There's only 3 landfills in the United States that's accepting these obsolete wind turbine blades. And the wind turbine, I didn't know nothing about it. So our local paper had a big aerial drone footage taken of a D9 cat bearing these huge blades. I mean, these blades are 120 feet long. They cut them into 40-foot sections and haul them on semis. They're just dumping them off and they're throwing them in there. I started looking at, that's a lot of material to throw in, bury and throw in the garbage pile. So I started researching it, and I started finding out these blades, they cost $125,000 a piece, brand new. And they're made out of fiberglass, and some of them have a balsa wood liner in them. They're older technology. Yeah. And I started thinking like, wow, that just seems to be what a waste. I said, my artist mind started kicking. I took out a pad and I drew up my first sketch. It was called Tomorrow the Sun Will Rise Again. And I was using the blaze of sun rays to come out. I said, that's kind of cool. And then the next thing I know, I came up with another design. I was going to do a copy of Stonehenge. I called it Windshenge. And then I came up with a wind cathedral. And I've been trying to raise it. So I started contacting these energy companies that were paying to have these blades buried. And I was saying, why don't you give me these blades and some money and I'll make something out of them instead of spending. I think they were paying almost $10,000 to bury these blades. I'm not sure per blade. It was expensive. And I've been working on it for a little over 3 years now. And I've gotten one group that I've gotten a lot of notes. I've given probably 6 or 7 presentations. That's a good idea. And then the companies say, yeah, we want to do this. And then when it comes to it, well, we can't really give you any blueprints on the blades. Then we got some blades that are in this farm field in some Nebraska. You could use those blades. And then when it comes to finally getting the blades, it seems like there's always something coming up. But I haven't given up on the project. And if you want to look at it, it's on YouTube. It's called Saving Wind Turbine Blades by Chris Navarro. And I can't think of you take some of this destined for the trash bin and you go make these humongous sculptures. Some of these sculptures would be 108 feet in diameter. The one I've got that I'm trying to make, the first one is Wind Cathedral. It's going to be, I'm going to make them out of 45-foot blades, 12 of them, and it's going to be, I don't know, about 39 feet tall and 85 feet long, and you'll be able to walk through it. You'll be able to ride a bicycle through it. It's going to be on a bike trail. So I haven't given up on them. It's just been, I guess it was easy for everybody to do it, but it has been a struggle. I mean, you get a lot of no's at being an artist. No matter what part of your career or how much success you've had, I still deal with those all the time. And in fact, I wrote a letter to the last company I approached about doing these blades. And they said, we like your idea and everything, but we're going to pass. I said, you know what? Just because you say no doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. It just means I'm not going to do it with you. Yeah. And that's kind of the attitude you got to take. But I'm going to get one done. I've told everybody I was going to do it, so I'm going to get one done. I don't know
Yeah.
when. I'm getting close. I mean, I've raised money for one already. You know, it's just getting the blades. So if anybody hears this podcast and you've got some big wind turbine blades, you need to repurpose instead of throwing them in the dump or cutting them into pieces. Give me a call.
You might have some luck maybe reaching out to someone in Norway actually. Norway has a lot of wind turbines as well.
Oh,
And
that's a big problem because in the United States we have all this open ground out here, and they're burying these blades. They're stacking them up. They buried, I don't know, I believe they buried over 1,000 blades at our landfill last year.
right.
And these blades don't, they have a shorter shelf life than people think. I mean, they're supposed to last 20 years, but those blades that they were burying, I went out there and looked at them and talked to the companies. I mean, I put a lot of time and effort in this. I've actually cast 5 bronzes, I think, from the designs that I've made. Once tomorrow the sun will rise again, it has the sun coming up out of the earth, and it's the blades are shooting out as the sun rays, and that was my very first design. But like I said, my artist mind got a hold of me on this, and I don't know why, but I've always kind of followed my intuitions because I really haven't really done a lot of abstract. I mean, they're purely abstract designs for sure, and I saw those big crystals, that take up half the side of a hill, that are temporary.
Yep.
And I'd like the idea of making a sculpture you can see from 5-6 miles away. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other interesting
Walk
thing
through.
that yeah. The other
Did you have a chance
interesting
to watch
thing
that? Did you have a chance to watch that video?
I did. I watched the whole video of your little maquettes of the wind turbine like parts.
Yeah.
I really, really loved the cathedral actually and Stonehenge. Well, the Windhenge because I'm a huge fan of Stonehenge and seeing it, with the wind turbines, in that circle for that outer circle with like the little like roof sort of thing. I that looks
Yeah.
so wonderful and I would want to walk through it. Which, I was going to say that I love that in this in these ideas, you've mostly gone a more architectural route, which is,
Yeah.
I love that, with sculpture specifically, there's always a little bit of that blurred, sort of line that can happen in between the two professions in a way, like sculpture can easily lead into architecture and is usually a part of architecture, especially in the past.
Well, I've been trying some new different art forms because don't get me wrong, I like sculpting a guy riding a bucket horse, but that's not all I want to do. I'm working on a series that's called, I've made up a couple of my own art terms. That's called abstractism because I'm using realistic wildlife figures and I'm using geometric abstract designs and combining the two together. And like I did one where the geese are flying and there's a mountain and the moon and the geese are flying through there. And it's very abstract, very open. And it's called the moon when the geese return, which is April. That's the natives called that month. I thought that's a pretty poetic title, and that's how you should do it. One thing about titles, I think they enhance a sculpture or a piece of art. And a lot of times I'll come up with a title before I'll come up with a sculpture. That's happened several times. I did a piece called "If You Want to See a Rainbow, You Got to Stand a Little Rain," and it's a cowboy and he's sitting on his horse and he's got a big arcing. The rainbow dominates the sculpture and the figure's small, but he's sitting up there and he's looking up at the rainbow and it's just finished raining on him. And it has a real strong abstract design running through it. In fact, good art has abstract designs in it anyways, whether it's realistic or not.
Well, yeah.
I always think about that. I like to use the circle. I like to use an inverted pyramid in a lot of designs because it's appealing to me and it's appealing to the eye. So that was abstractism. And then I came up with another idea of doing sculptics. So I tried to tell us, instead of a triptych, it's 2 paintings with a sculpture, where I'm combining sculptures and painting it into one element of art. And I don't know, I've done about half a dozen of those probably.
Wow. So cool. That goes to
I like
show
to
you
make, I
can't
like to
just
make up my
settle.
own words too. Sculptic, abstractism.
Yeah. But that's part of the magic of creation and of that flow, of letting yourself be guided by your inspiration. And of course, there is a point where like you have to be sure, like, okay, is this really something I want to pursue? Because, sometimes we do have bad ideas, quote unquote.
Oh yeah,
But
I've
I
had
feel like
plenty of those. Don't get me wrong. I swing the bat at them hard every time, but I hit
yeah.
a foul ball every once in a while, just like everybody.
Yeah,
Part of
I
that.
think it.
If you don't hit some bad balls, you never know when you're going to hit a good one, you know. But you got to hit a lot of
Exactly.
balls to get, get to the good one. So I've
Right.
had I've had some sculptures I've just destroyed because they weren't that good. You know, you spend a month on something and you just look at it and say, man, this is not cutting it. You just got to be honest with yourself. I remember I was doing this big wolf howling one time, and I don't know, God, I spent a lot of time on it. Finally, I looked at it and I said, gee, that's just not that impressive, really. That just doesn't. I destroyed it, you know. And
Yeah.
like I said, I can reuse that clay
It's, yeah,
because
that's great.
as a sculptor, you try to recycle as much as you can, and clay is one of them. Because I usually use classic medium clay as the sculpture medium I work in the most. And then when I'm doing monuments, I'll work on a softer one. So classic clay comes in like 3 hardnesses, and I've never liked working with hard because it's just not forgiving. But for tabletop pieces, I like to use classic medium. It comes in 2 colors, a tan and a dark brown. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there to let other artists know exactly what I'm using. And I only use a handful of little tools. You know, I don't have a whole. I use about. I'd say I got maybe 6 tools that I really like, and I don't really use any more than that. And a lot of them I've made myself. You know, I've made these really like doing fine faces and everything. Is I made them with guitar strings and
Yeah.
copper tubing. So those have always worked out good. Just put them in a vise and loop yours in there, and they make really fine rakes. It's another
Yeah.
little pointer to sculptors out there I can give them that are working in clay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point to make. I mean, when I did sculpture at the school in New York, we used guitar string, tools where like the teacher we had, she was so wonderful. She showed us how to make it, and she like had some guitar string that she brought, and she also showed us how to do it ourselves, how to wrap it up. And it makes an excellent, raking tool, especially for those fine details when you're finishing out, because of course you have to start with a much bigger one. You have to be more broad and more specific at first, and then you start digging in to those
Yeah,
delicious
I
details.
used to play guitar too, so I quit playing guitar. It's been hard on my hands, and I
Yeah.
don't know. I wanted to get really good at it, and it was taking so much time, and I just felt like God, that's and I'm starting to get some arthritis in my hands. That's one of the bad things about it. But I'd rather use them up, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I like making things with my hands. That's for sure. That's my favorite tool, really. It's just getting clay and roughing sculptures in with your hands
Yeah.
and doing
Wow.
these quick draws. They're always fun to do. Like I said, you get to do them in 90 minutes, and then you do these big art shows. Like that's the Buffalo Bill Art Show in Cody, Wyoming. That's a fabulous museum. If everybody gets a chance to go to Cody, Wyoming, go to the Buffalo Bill Historical Center. It's got 7 wings. It's the Smithsonian of the West. It really is. It's one of the most impressive museums I've ever been in. It's a small town in Cody, Wyoming, right by just near the gate of the west gate of Yellowstone Park. It's beautiful country up there. I like Cody a lot. That's my other home away from home because my foundry's up there, and I've been going up there casting for 43 years. I used to have
That's
an airplane.
amazing.
'Cause I'm tired of driving back and forth, so I learned to fly and bought me an airplane, so I go back and forth. And I did that for about I don't know 15 years or so. But yeah, I tell you what, if you don't like money, buy an airplane.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine that, a lot of the costs go into the storing it, and then, paying for the gas, and then
Hills and everything else. But
maintaining it.
it's a
Yeah.
quick way to get somewhere sometimes,
That's
especially in
true.
Wyoming. There's not a lot of controlled airspace. It's pretty cool. There's
Yeah.
only 4 towers in the whole state. So that's one thing I like about Wyoming. Wyoming's just not a lot of people live out there. I mean, it's the least populated state in the United States.
Yeah.
There's a half a million people live in the whole state, and it's as big as Colorado. So we're right above Colorado. So and
Amazing.
Wyoming's just it's got everything. I mean, you got from Yellowstone Park down to the deserts. I mean, but like winters can be pretty cold up there.
I can imagine. Yeah,
Yeah.
being way up north, it can get to you. Um, but yeah, wow. Um, so I wanted to know, how do you personally use, online and social media to get your work out there?
I use mostly Facebook. I mean, in my experience, I mean, I've tried Instagram a little bit, but it just seems like the only real success I've really had is with Facebook. And then I was buying ads and doing these other things, and that's not really what it is. It's an organic thing. I have my personal Facebook page. It's full of 5,000. You know, you're only allowed to have 5,000 people on your personal, but I got a business one too. But I get more response off my personal Facebook page than anything that I've shown in media. And then also I put everything on Pinterest, put everything on YouTube. So I got those videos. And I think, you know, when you put something on the internet, the good thing about it is it's there. You can go back 10 years and still pull it up and see if somebody can still be viewing it. You know, as far as SEO and search engine optimization, I really don't spend a whole lot of time on that. You know, I think if people find out about you, one of the good things I really heard about it, you know, collectors want to have a relationship with the artists. That's the ones that want to buy art from you. And you don't have the possibility of meeting everybody and face to face. So the next best thing you can do is have a virtual relationship. And that's what we're having right now. You know, we're having a virtual relationship, and then artists, people get to feel like they know you. Because I think that collectors want to have a relationship with the artists that they collect, whether it's a virtual or a real, you know. And it's fortunate. I mean, you think you're going to make something with your hands that you're going to be able to sell to another individual to help support your family. I mean, that's how you support yourself. And relationships is where it's really at. And it's the same with galleries. I've been with some gallery. I've been with one gallery now for 40 years, you know, the Bighorn Gallery in Cody, Wyoming. And I was with the Breckenridge Gallery for like I was in 10 galleries at one time, and almost all of them that I've been in have closed for one reason or another. But I've had long relationships with galleries, you know, in the 30 plus years, you know, and you build that out. You build it out with trust and keeping your word and honor and everything, you know. I'm a big believer in, you know, I've done my first few monuments I did on a handshake and not a 17-page contract like I had to do with the University of Wyoming. You know, you want that? I put my hand out there and said, let's do it. That's how I did my first half dozen monuments. And I was able to pull those off, you know, and my word's better than any, you know, thing on a piece of paper. You know, you got to follow through. I've developed that reputation that I'm a guy that get things done and when he says and how he says. So that leads to something. And, you know, you got to have that reputation to, you know, continue going. Because, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people who want to be professional artists because it's such a great way to make a living. And it's very competitive out there. And everybody's trying to find this certain way to do things. And if you're able to make a living at it, you know, you're very blessed because there's not a lot of people that get to make a living as full-time artists.
Yeah.
But like I said, now I think there's more people making a living as a full-time artist than any time before.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely the internet has provided room for more, for sure. Like more people who they have a certain way of doing things, and then the one collector who really likes that, you know, will buy it. And you know, it's like you said, it's on the one hand, you know, being present, you know, letting people see your work, putting it out there, right? Pinterest, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you can, having a website, of course. And then also, you know, the face-to-face contact, you know, that relationship with the
That's
collector.
really, you know, I did this.
Second,
A guy came into my gallery and told me about a competition called Art Prize. It's in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Have you ever heard of it?
I heard about it actually through your previous interview. So yeah, but
Well,
tell
you
us
know,
about
here
it.
I am. This is like, I don't know, this is only like 4 or 5 years ago. And this guy came into my gallery and he goes, "Hey, man, you got to do some really nice work. You got to think about doing Art Prize." I don't know, what is Art Prize? So it's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's 1,400 artists compete in this competition, and the People's Choice Award gets $200,000. I got into it, and that's when I did that sculpture, Dare to Dream Big. I said, I know a sculpture would do good there. So I got involved in that. And it's done all by a voting app. So, but 100,000 people come through that show. It was the 10th year when I did it. I think it was in its 10th year. And I was one of the top 20 finalists and made the 20 finalists that would be picked for getting the grand prize. Didn't get the grand prize, but I gave it my best shot. So that's all I could do. But it was interesting because, you know, I haven't really interacted with that many people at one. It was a 19-day art show. That's another thing. I thought I was just going to leave my sculpture and leave. The guy goes, you're not going to win if you don't live. You know, well, I said, I'd like to win. He said, well, there's only one way to win, and that's you have to stay by your artwork and try to get people, you know, and meet people and get them to vote. That's why I didn't have any intention of doing that book. So, you know, basically the sculpture it's a cat. He's looking in a mirror and he sees himself reflected back as a lion. And he's sitting on a stack of books that say The Power of Belief. And there's a mouse looking around the corner at this cat, thinking like, this guy thinks he's a lion now, But it has a sense of humor to it, and it has a good message to it. And then
Yeah.
so I wanted to make it interactive. So I built these outdoor 4 by 6 foot double-sided blackboard chalkboards that you could write on next to the sculpture. And it said, "When I dare to dream big, I will." And then you do what you say, what your dream is. It's about writing your goals down and making them come true, which I'm a firm believer in, writing your goals down. So
Yes.
So my wife and I were running this show, and I had to go back and do another art show, and she stayed there, and when she started taking photos of all the people who would write on the chalkboards, because they'd fill up in a few hours, because we were getting thousands of people come by a day, and they'd write their dreams down, and some of them were like beautiful dreams. Some of them were smart aleck dreams, but we took pictures of those. So I had my phone with me. I started taking all these pictures of them writing, and my wife too. And when I got back, I started reading them, and I thought, God, those are like, there's one in there like says, "I want to help my grandson survive cancer." And I was just like, tear your heart out, And then I remember this guy came up, and he had a stroke, and he was in a wheelchair, and he couldn't hardly talk, and his daughter was pushing him around. And he wrote on there, "I want to walk again." And then he got out of his wheelchair hard, and he walked over and touched the sculpture, and then he sat back down hard. It's all his effort he could do. And I said, wow, I got to record this and write a book about this. So I had no intention of writing Dare to Dream Big, which is I think the third book I did. It came out, and almost all those pictures are taken with a cell phone. And I just started recording all those dreams that people had, because everybody has dreams, and I don't know, it was just kind of a cool story. But I got to interact with more people in that 19 days. I bet there was 10,000 people I talked to. It seemed like a lot of people. It was a cool experience. And then to go see all this art that they put in there, there's more on the contemporary side. There's some really cool things in there. A photographer won the main award, the $200,000 award, and he had traveled around the world. He was from Argentina. I listened to him. It was a very cool story. Him and his wife, they traveled around the world on $36 a day, I think is what he said. And it was amazing to see how he did it and all this, and how we're all connected. So he had like everybody holding this rope, and it was a cool piece. I thought it deserved to win. It was very cool. And, it was an experience, because I've never been in an art show with 1,400 artists.
That's a lot.
And that's just in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But I mean, they travel from all over to come, but it's still going on now. I don't know how I decided once was enough for me, but it rained and snowed. I was outside. It was a long 19 days, but we got through it.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was a really heartwarming experience, to meet so many people who, even the simplest dream, it can tell such a big story, compared to, maybe a grand dream, right?
That's why you should write your dreams down. That's the first step to making them come true. You see it in print, it's your own print. You say like, wow. And I look back through some of my old books I've written, and down my dreams, I'm like, hey, I got that one done. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Oh, I didn't make that one, but it's still there. So, I think part of, who doesn't want their dreams to come true? And one way to do it is write it down. And that's what that whole sculpture's story was. Dare to dream big, if you're gonna dream, why not dream big?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's so inspiring. Do you have any upcoming projects or shows or exhibitions that you'd like to promote?
I'm doing I have a show this month or in March. It's a Briscoe. It's called Night of the Artists. It's a pretty big Western art show. It's down in San Antonio, Texas, at the Briscoe Art Museum. In fact, I did one of the head guys there commissioned me about in 2018. I did a big monument for the Alamo, which is a really famous historical museum now in Texas. And it's an equestrian sculpture with a guy, and he's on his horse's rear and charging forward. And there's a famous letter that was written by Colonel Travis. He's getting ready to be overrun in Alamo, where they annihilated everybody there. And this John W. Smith is the guy who did the sculpture of. This is back in 1836. So, I researched this sculpture, tried to get the saddle and all the clothing and the firearms he'd be carrying, and try to, do a historical, accurate portrayal of it. So it's my my parents grew up in San Antonio, and that's where the Alamo is, so it's kind of cool to have a piece there.
That's amazing. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
exciting.
they get a couple million people a year go to the Alamo, so it's gets seen by a lot of people. It's in the back courtyard.
Yeah. I mean, I have it on my bucket list, so maybe by the time I go, your piece will be there.
It'll be there. It'll still be there. It's going to be,
Great.
the Alamo is, it's a real historical thing. It's a lot smaller than when you see it in person. It was a
Yeah.
Spanish mission, but when you go inside it, and the people at the Alamo gave me a whole tour of it. We went out into a lot of places that a lot of people don't get to go, and it's got this big courtyard around it. But the Alamo itself as a fort isn't that big. It's
Mhm.
surprisingly, when you first see it, you think it's a lot bigger than, in your mind, it's a lot bigger, but it's pretty cool to go see it. It's the most visited historical site in Texas.
I mean, I'm not surprised. It's very notorious, the story. Um, yeah, I grew up listening to the story about the Alamo and all the people who died there. It's an incredible story. But speaking of your work, where can people see more of your work?
Well, I own my own gallery in Sedona, Arizona. We've been open 24 years this year in the same location. It's called Tlaquepaque. And Tlaquepaque is designed after a Spanish-style mission in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Mm,
So Tlaquepaque is a native word, means the best of everything. Because when I first got there, it's hard to pronounce because when you see it spelled out, Tlaquepaque,
yeah.
people go, "Yeah, you're at that Taki Paki place," So, but people resonate with it because it's called
Yeah.
Tlaquepaque. It's probably one of the most visited places in Sedona because there's like 45 shops and restaurants in this Spanish mission, and it's cobblestones with beautiful fountains and beautiful gardens. It's very well meticulously maintained. It's a beautiful place, really. In fact, I can't think of a better place. And one of the reasons I got a gallery there is because they let me have a sculpture garden. So I have a lot of big outdoor
Right.
sculptures in front of it. I got a 12-foot tall rear nut horse in the front, and 9-foot bull elk, couple of life-size grizzly bears, and I've got about 9 big pieces out front in our courtyard.
Amazing.
So that's one of the reasons I picked that place because I it's hard to find a place that'll show your big sculptures because there's not many galleries can do that.
Yeah.
That's another reason I opened my own gallery. I didn't really want to open a gallery, but I had so many castings available. It's hard to have a gallery show 75 pieces of your work. And they're not, if you're on a consignment with a gallery, they're going to take on maybe 6 to 10 pieces maximum, and then what are you going to do with the rest of them? So
Right.
I really needed a kind of a venue to show my total work. So that's how I got in the gallery business, kind of by accident, really. I mean, but I'm glad I did do it. I think it's been a real boost for my career, having my own gallery, but you got employees, you got a lot of payments, you got to keep it going. So it keeps you
Yeah.
motivated.
Yes, definitely. And again, you can handle it because, you've had that lifetime experience of being a tenacious, person who can really roll with the punches, which is amazing.
Well, that's a good quality to have as an artist. You got to be an optimist. It
Yes.
helps that you're an optimist. I'll put it that way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I constantly think, I don't want to know the odds. I'm just going to go for it.
That's what that. Remember I told you that faith and ignorance. That's
Yep. There it is.
I want to know. You don't want to know the odds.
No.
You
No.
base your life on odds that this might happen. That's not a way to go. You just
No.
gotta have a belief and not a real big plan B. Just kind of make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. By the way, what is your website?
It's chrisnavarro.com. Pretty
Perfect.
simple.
Awesome.
I said I got my first website in '96, so that's kind of I've been in the website as an artist kind of at the early stages. In '96, I would say the internet was just getting going good, or starting to, anyways.
Mhm.
But it's just really gone crazy just the last few years. I think it's just gonna get more that way too, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I mean, any artist can show his work to as many people as he can. He wants to spend the time and effort getting his artwork out there. That's the good thing about it. But you got to spend. A lot of artists don't think you need to spend that much time promoting your work, but you really have to if you want to be successful. Because
Yes.
no art agent's going to come around and discover you.
No.
It, it's going to be up to you to do it. So that's why you got to learn to wear a lot of hats.
Yep. Yeah. That's Very wise words. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us and for giving us so much amazing information. I'm extremely inspired. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad. That makes me feel good that you can, hopefully you inspire people with your work. I saw that guy's sculpture when I was 23 years old, and it lit a spark in me, and it's still
Yeah,
burning. And maybe someday somebody will walk up and see one of my sculptures, light a spark in them.
absolutely. Yes.
It's amazing because if I wouldn't have seen that sculpture, I don't know where, it's amazing how your life takes these forks in life, where you go down this road. And I saw that sculpture and it just lit something inside me. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah. You
overthink
really
it. I just
followed
said,
that.
what? I need to go make something like that. I want to make something like that. I want to have that beauty and power that this guy created. I want to be able to do that myself.
Yeah.
That's how I got in it.
Amazing. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
My pleasure.